The carriage stopped with a sound softer than breath, but inside me, the silence cracked like thunder. I didn't dare look through the curtained window, though my hands itched to part the velvet and see what waited. Instead, I stared down at my lap, at the pale skin of my fingers trembling against the folds of white silk. The dress they gave me clung like a second skin, too delicate for a girl born to bleed. A soft knock against the wood. 1, 2, 3. Then the door opened, and cold air wrapped around me like warning. He wasn't the one who stood outside. Not yet, but I could feel him. Somewhere beyond the mist and marble steps, he was watching, waiting, claiming me without touch. "Signorina," said the voice of an older man, gentle and respectful, "you may descend." I rose, slowly, like rising from the grave. My legs shook, traitorous, but I stepped out, veil drawn over my face. The world outside was older than I'd imagined. Carved stone, burning torches, ivy strangling ancient walls. Rocca Notte, the fortress of the Rosa Croce, my new prison, my new altar. The steps were long, winding. I walked them barefoot, as instructed, feeling each stone press into my skin like a secret oath. Behind me, the guards walked in silence. Ahead, a door opened. Heat spilled out. Candlelight, incense, a pulse that wasn't mine. I stepped inside and time slowed. He was there, not near me, not touching me, but I knew it was him. He stood at the far end of the hall, all shadow and stillness, the kind of silence that owned every sound around it. My veil blurred the lines of his face, but I saw the shape of his jaw, the command in his shoulders, the gravity in his stillness. He didn't move, he didn't speak, but I felt his eyes settle on me like fire across snow. They told me he would be cold, controlled, a man of law and legacy, but what I felt wasn't law. It was hunger, dark and holy. "Walk," someone whispered. I obeyed. Each step brought me closer, closer to the man I was promised to since birth, closer to the ritual, closer to the burn in my chest that had no name yet. I reached the altar. He didn't greet me. Instead, his voice came low, from somewhere deeper than the earth. "You're smaller than I expected." I said nothing. My breath caught. Lift the veil. My fingers hesitated, then rose. The silk slipped back, and for the first time, our eyes met. His were darker than I dreamed. Older. Not with years. With weight. With memories I would never understand, and sins I was about to inherit. His gaze didn't drift. It didn't linger. It devoured. My lips parted, a soft breath escaping, but I couldn't look away. I didn't want to. I should have bowed. I should have looked down, but something held me. "Your name," he said, "is Serafina, but after the ritual, it will be mine." His words were quiet, reverent, but they struck me harder than any blow. "I was told you were obedient," he continued, stepping forward at last. His steps were soundless, his presence enormous. I wonder if that obedience will survive my hands. Heat flooded my chest, a mix of shame and something I didn't know how to name. I opened my mouth to speak, to answer, to please, but nothing came. He reached me then. One hand rose, not to touch, just to hover, a breath away from my cheek. "I will not touch what is not yet claimed, but I will warn you." I swallowed, afraid to breathe. "You will not smile at the guards. You will not speak unless spoken to. And you will never, ever give your softness to another man's eyes. Do you understand?" His voice was low, calm, but every syllable carried steel. I nodded. "Yes," I whispered. It came out thinner than I wanted. He leaned closer, his breath warm against my ear. "You will learn," he murmured, "that being mine means being watched, desired, guarded. Every inch of you will be sacred, and off limits to the world." He straightened, eyes never leaving mine. "Your training is over. Tomorrow, we begin." He turned, walking away without another word, leaving me standing before the altar, bare and burning inside. Behind me, a door closed. The ritual chamber dimmed. I was alone, but not untouched. Not anymore.
She didn't blink, not once. And I watched her the way a starving man watches the flame that will cook his only meal, with reverence and restraint and hunger so sharp it flirts with madness. Serafina Morelli, promised to me since before she bled, since before she spoke, since before the world ever dared whisper that purity could be purchased. But what stood before me now was not a thing bought. It was something summoned. The veil had slipped, but she hadn't, not yet. Her hands trembled slightly, her lips parted, uncertain, soft. I could almost taste her hesitation from across the stone floor, and yet she held my gaze. That was her first mistake. No one looks at me that long without consequence. The moment passed. slow and deliberate, like the slide of silk against skin. I turned before I touched her, not because I wanted to, but because if I didn't, I would. And she wasn't ready, not for what I'd do to her, not for how I'd mark her from the inside out. But I saw the spark flicker, just barely, when my breath had kissed her ear, and that was all I needed. Obedience wasn't enough. I wanted devotion. I wanted awe. I wanted to see her tremble at the sound of my voice, and soften beneath the weight of my hands. Back in my quarters, I poured a drink I didn't taste and sat in the dark, listening. The castle murmured when it slept. Footsteps. Walls shifting with old secrets. And then, her laughter. Not much. A chime. A note. But it carried. I rose. Through the corridor, her voice reached me again. This time lighter, girlish, directed at someone who did not deserve it. One of the guards, perhaps. Or the house steward. She didn't know better. Yet, she'd lived in silence, protected from everything but herself. And now, here she was, smiling, at someone that wasn't me. I didn't knock when I entered her chamber. The guards moved aside without meeting my gaze. Smart. The door opened, candlelight flickered like it feared me, and there she stood, draped in a pale nightgown too thin to be decent, her hair unbound, glowing like something celestial or sacrificial. She turned quickly, startled, but not afraid. Not yet. My lord, she said softly, her voice careful, gentle, still too open. You were laughing, I said. Her lips parted. I was speaking with Julia. She told me. I didn't ask what she told you. I closed the door. Her breath caught. She took a step back. Not in fear. No. In confusion. In instinct. I stepped forward. Do you know what happens? I said, my tone a thread pulled tight between threat and promise. To things that shine too brightly where they shouldn't? She shook her head, slowly. No. They get taken. Her mouth open. No words came. I crossed the distance between us in 2 slow strides, stopping just close enough for her to feel the heat radiating. I didn't touch her, but I let her feel what it would be like if I did. You do not smile at me. You do not speak to men unless I say so. You do not exist in this house except through. She swallowed. But I was only what? My voice was soft now. Too soft. Practicing kindness? Being polite? Her eyes dropped. Yes. No. I leaned closer. From now on, you smile only for me. You speak when I allow it. You breathe when I say it's safe. She blinked fast. I didn't mean. You don't need to mean. You just need to learn. I paused. Let her feel the silence coil around. And you will. I will teach you. She nodded. Barely. The softest movement. But it was there. I reached up. Let the back of my fingers trail just above the curve of her cheek. Not touching. Watching her flinch from nothing. Then I leaned in. Whispering so close I knew she felt the heat of every syllable against her skin. You are mine, Seraphine, and before long, even your soul will beg to be claimed. I straightened, turned, and walked out. This time, I smiled.
The door clicked shut behind him, but the echo of his voice didn't leave. It hung in the air like incense, thick and heavy, seeping into my lungs, my skin, the hollow between my thighs. You are mine, Seraphina. The words kept replaying, not like a threat but a claim. Not shouted, but etched. I stood frozen in the center of the room, heart pounding with the rhythm of something I didn't yet understand. Shame and heat, and something that felt too much like longing burned beneath my skin. I had spoken out of turn, smiled too freely. Broken rules I hadn't known were written, and still, part of me wanted to smile again, just to feel that crackle in the air when his eyes found mine, to provoke that thunder low in his voice. What kind of girl was I becoming? The nightgown clung to me as I moved, the silk cold from the air but warm where his nearness had touched me. I brought my fingers to my cheek, the one he hadn't touched, and shivered, not because of the chill, because I wished he had. A knock interrupted the spin of my thoughts, then a soft voice. Signorina, it is time. Julia entered with 2 other women I didn't know, all dressed in black. Their eyes didn't meet mine. They moved like shadows, efficient, wordless, and began undressing me as if I were not human, but a doll they'd been ordered to dismantle. I stood still, letting the gown slip off my shoulders and pool at my feet, letting them scrub my skin with hot cloths and oils that smelled of crushed roses and smoke. I tried to be obedient. I tried to be calm, but when one of them ran a blade across the soft inside of my thigh, not deep, just enough to let a bead of blood form, I gasped. Julia caught my eyes in the mirror. The ritual does not allow untouched flesh, she said simply. Every part of you must bleed for him. My lips parted, but no sound came. I nodded. They painted my body next, strange symbols with ash and wine, brushing them along the slope of my stomach, the curve of my spine, the hollows of my collarbones. I didn't understand the markings. I didn't ask. I only breathed and let myself become what they were making. Not a girl, not a bride, an offering. When they veiled me again, it was with red this time, crimson so deep it looked black in candlelight, a reminder that purity wasn't white. It was blood, and I was about to give mine. They led me through halls I hadn't seen, through a door carved with roses and wolves. The air changed as we entered, thicker, warmer, charged. He was already there. I knew it before I saw him. I felt him. The chamber was silent, but not empty. Men stood along the walls, cloaked and solemn, and at the center, him, Dante, my husband-to-be, my captor, my claim. He stood before the altar, dressed in black, his eyes locked on me the moment I appeared. I didn't look away. I couldn't. Not when he stepped forward, slow and deliberate, like he was approaching prey that had already surrendered. He stopped only inches away. "You are ready," he said. Not a question. "Yes," I breathed. His fingers reached for the edge of my veil and lifted it slowly, dragging the silk upward until my face was bare again. He didn't speak for a moment, just looked. "Beautiful," he said finally, "and mine." Then he turned to the priest. "It begins now." And so it did.
She looked at me like she didn't know whether to bow or burn, and I wanted both. I watched her chest rise with the weight of unspoken fear, the veil still hanging from my fingers, the scent of rose ash and sacred things clinging to her skin. Her lips trembled, not from cold. The room was hot with flame and tension, but from the heaviness of everything I was about to take. And yet, even now, even veiled in blood and ritual, she hadn't looked away. My Serafina. I turned to the priest and gave the nod. Words were spoken. Old words. Ancient ones. Passed from father to son to butcher to blade. But I didn't hear them. I watched her. Every shift of her weight. Every twitch of her fingers. She stood like an offering carved in marble. But I knew what marble sounded like. It cracked. I stepped closer as the chanting deepened, my boots silent over the black stone. "Are you afraid?" I asked, low, so only she would hear. Her answer was soft. "Yes." "Good." The priest handed me the blade, curved, silver, older than my name. I took it. Her arm lifted slowly, bare now, already smeared with oil and powder. She didn't flinch when I wrapped my fingers around her wrist, but I felt her pulse, rapid, wild, alive. I pressed the flat of the blade to her skin. No pressure, not yet. "This," I said, still close, still low, "is not meant to hurt you. It's meant to remind you." She swallowed. "Of what?" I dragged the blade, slow and shallow, across the inside of her forearm. Her gasp was soft, held in her throat. Her blood rose immediately, bright and obedient. I watched a single drop trail down her skin and land in the silver bowl between us. "That you are mine," I said. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her eyes said everything. Not defiance, not surrender. Something in between, something dangerous. She would need discipline. The priest took the bowl, chanting louder now, raising it to the altar. Her blood was being offered, mixed with wine, burned with a sprig of dried heather. The smoke curled high. The men chanted deeper, and when the time came, I felt it. "Step forward," I told her. She moved, slow, elegant, uncertain, until we stood together before the altar. The priest handed me the seal, iron, scorched, marked with the crest of my bloodline, still hot. I turned to her. "This will scar." "I know," she whispered. "Do you accept it?" Her lips parted. "Yes." I pressed it to her skin, just above her heart, where the silk of her ceremonial robe had been parted for this moment. She didn't scream. She barely breathed, but her eyes widened, and I watched her body tense beneath the pain. When I pulled the seal away, the skin beneath was already red, raised, burning with my mark. She was shaking. I caught her before she fell. My arms closed around her small frame, lifting her easily. And in that moment, the chanting ceased. The room stilled. Even the flames held their breath, because everyone watching knew what came next. The veil was done. She was mine, and I would not wait another day.
He carried me like I was something breakable, but I knew he could shatter me if he wanted to. His arms were steel beneath silk, his breath steady against the crown of my head, but I could feel the storm beneath his stillness. Each step he took echoed through the stone halls like a vow no one dared interrupt. My skin still burned from the mark, raw, throbbing, but it wasn't pain I felt. Not really. It was something else, something deeper, something terrifyingly close to hunger. The ritual chamber disappeared behind us, swallowed by silence. There were no guards now, no witnesses, just me, trembling in his arms, and him, impossibly composed. But I could feel it, the tension in his jaw, the way his fingers flexed slightly against my thighs, like he was fighting the urge to grip harder, the way his pulse thundered, not from exertion, but restraint. When we reached his chambers, he didn't pause. The door opened before him, a gust of warm air and candlelight wrapping around us like breath. He set me down gently, but didn't let go. His hand stayed at the curve of my waist, firm, grounding. My legs barely held me, not from weakness, but from the weight of what was coming. He tilted my chin up with 2 fingers. His eyes searched mine, slow, intense, merciless. "You endured it," he said, voice velvet and iron. "Good. I didn't think I could," I whispered. "You didn't have a choice." There was no cruelty in his tone, just truth, and something else. Possession. "I should tell you," he murmured, brushing his knuckles down the side of my face. "This is the part where others would wait. They'd let you rest, heal, pretend to be gentle." He stepped closer. "I'm not one of them." My breath hitched. "I know." He leaned in, mouth grazing the shell of my ear. "Do you?" I nodded. "Say it." "I know," I breathed. "You're not gentle." "No," he whispered, his lips brushing mine. "But I'll make you crave the way I take you." My heart stopped, then raced. He stepped back just enough to untie the belt of his jacket, his eyes never leaving mine. The layers slipped away like shadows peeling from his skin. And still, no rush, no cruelty, just purpose, power. "Take it off," he said, voice low, eyes flicking to my robe. My fingers trembled as I reached for the clasps, each movement slow, deliberate, watched. When the fabric slid from my shoulders, he exhaled through his nose. Not a sound of approval, but possession. My body was marked, burned, bare. His gaze darkened. "You were made for this," he said. "No," I whispered. "I was made for you." He didn't smile, but he moved then, crossing the space between us with lethal grace. And when his mouth met mine, it wasn't a kiss. It was a claim. My breath vanished. My thoughts unraveled. There was only the heat of him, the weight, the taste of something ancient and male and mine. He lifted me again, laying me down on silk sheets I barely registered. His hands weren't hurried. They mapped me, memorized me, branded me. Every touch said one thing: "You belong to me." And I did, completely.
She lay beneath me, not like something conquered, but something offered. Her breath was shallow, her eyes wide, glassy, waiting, not from fear, no, but from something more dangerous. Trust, complete, unguarded, devastating trust. And that, more than her softness, more than her trembling lips, or the blood still drying where my seal burned into her skin, was what undid me. I hadn't known I wanted that, not until I saw it, not until it was mine. I hovered just above her, arms braced on either side of her head, letting the weight of me sink into the mattress but not into her, not yet. My mouth brushed her collarbone, slowly, deliberately, tracing the edge of the bruise I'd left when I'd pinned her earlier. She gasped, barely audible, and I felt it against my lips. That small sound, that surrender. I breathed it in. "You're quiet now," I said, voice low, dragging along her throat. "Where's the girl who smiled at my guards?" Her breath caught. "You were so generous with them," I murmured, pressing a kiss beneath her ear. So soft, so open. Her fingers curled against the sheets. I caught her chin between my thumb and forefinger, gently, but unyielding. "Tell me, Seraphine, did you want them to look at you, to wonder what I now own?" "No," she breathed. "No?" My brow arched as I pressed my mouth to hers. "Not to kiss, not quite, just the threat of it. Or not anymore," she whimpered, and the sound shattered something. "I didn't," she whispered, "what it meant. To belong." I smiled against her lips. "You will." I moved then, slowly, sliding my hand down the length of her side, feeling every inch like it had been sculpted for me, no other. She didn't flinch. She didn't turn away. Her body lifted toward mine with instinct she didn't know she had. And that innocence in the way she begged without words, that's what made me ache. "I'll teach you everything," I whispered, mouth brushing her ear. "How to breathe for me, cry for me, burn for me." Her nails grazed my shoulder, hesitant, like she didn't know what to do with the need climbing inside her. "You want to please me, don't you?" She nodded, flushed, breathless. "Say it." "I want to please you," she whispered. I moved deeper between her thighs, letting her feel me, hard and demanding, still restrained. "And what does that mean, little wife?" Her voice was so soft I almost missed it. "It means I'm yours." I closed my eyes, just for a second, to ground myself, because that voice, that obedience wrapped in devotion, nearly pushed me past reason. I kissed her then, fully, fiercely, devouring her answer, swallowing the sound of her surrender. And when I finally entered her, I did it with the slow, brutal reverence of a man who doesn't take what's his. He worships it, and I did. Every breath, every gasp, every broken cry against my name. I took it all, and gave her everything in return.
I woke before the light reached the windows, my body aching in ways I didn't understand, each movement whispering his name through my bones. The sheets beneath me were wrinkled, scented with him, stained with what we became last night. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just breathed, and with each breath, I remembered the weight of him. The way his voice curled around my name like a promise and a threat. The way he held me after, not gentle, but possessive. As if now that he had taken me, he had no intention of letting me forget who I belonged to. My thighs were sore. My lips were swollen. My heart didn't know if it was trembling or blooming. He was already gone. I sat up slowly, letting the silk robe fall over my shoulders, not bothering to tie it. My skin was marked, red where his hands had claimed me, bruised where his mouth had stayed too long, but there was no shame in it, only heat. I walked barefoot across the marble floor, the chill kissing my toes, the silence pressing against my thoughts. I didn't know what I was now, wife, offering, possession, but I knew I wasn't what I was yesterday. A knock came, not heavy, not hesitant. Julia entered with a tray, her eyes lowered. She said nothing of the marks on my neck, the way I winced when I sat. She didn't need to. Women like her were trained to see without seeing. Your breakfast, Signora. I wasn't used to the title. It felt like armor I hadn't earned. I'm not hungry, I said, though my voice betrayed me with a rasp I couldn't hide. She nodded once, setting the tray down. There will be guests today. Guests? The men of the inner circle, and their wives. I stiffened. My fingers found the edge of the table. Why? To see you, she said as if it were obvious. To see what kind of woman was given to him. A chill traced down my spine. I wasn't ready for eyes. I wasn't ready for judgment, but I would be. When the time came, I wore a dark green dress, one Dante hadn't chosen, but one I suspected he would approve of. Modest in shape, high-necked, long sleeves, but the silk clung to my waist, and the fabric shimmered when I moved. I wanted them to see I wasn't just a name on paper. I wanted them to see I had been claimed. The hall was already full when I entered. Laughter, voices, the clinking of glasses. But when I stepped in, it all shifted. Eyes turned, conversations hushed. I could feel their scrutiny like teeth against my skin. And among them, standing with his back to the window, was Dante. He didn't smile. He didn't move toward me. He simply watched. I crossed the room slowly, nodding where I was expected to, offering soft greetings where custom demanded. I smiled at a woman who looked old enough to be my grandmother. I thanked a man who said I looked delicate just as tradition requires. I did everything right, until I laughed. It was a quiet laugh, barely a sound, at something the steward said, a harmless joke about the wine. But it was enough. I felt it the moment it happened. Dante moved, not rushed, not obvious, but with a purpose no one could ignore. He was beside me in seconds, his hand slipping around my waist like steel wrapped in velvet. She's not here to entertain, he said to the man, his voice calm and cold. The steward paled, nodded, stepped back, and Dante leaned in, lips grazing my ear. Smile again, he whispered, and I'll remind you, in front of everyone, exactly how I taught you who you belong to. I shivered, not from fear, from knowing I wanted him to.
She didn't resist when I took her arm. She didn't even blink, but I felt the pulse flutter beneath her skin as I guided her from the crowd, each step hers, each decision mine. The hallway swallowed us whole, long and silent, stone beneath our feet, the kind of silence that begs to be broken. She walked with her head high, but her breath was unsteady, like a candle in the mouth of a storm, and I knew exactly how close she was to begging. The door to my chambers groaned as it closed behind us, locking out the world, locking her in. She turned to face me, and I let the silence stretch. Let it ache. Her mouth opened, maybe to apologize, maybe to explain, but I didn't want her word. I wanted her submission, earned, felt, not forced. I took a step forward. She didn't move back. You think it's harmless? I said, voice calm, controlled, low enough that each word curled between us like smoke. A laugh, a glance, a soft thank you. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. I didn't mean... No, I cut in. Not loud but final. You didn't mean... But your mouth moves, and they watch. Your eyes shine, and they think they can reach for what's mine. Her breath caught. They need to know, I said, circling her slowly, my fingers grazing the silk at her waist, that even your smile is not free. I stopped behind, close enough for her to feel every word against her neck. But more importantly, I leaned in, letting my lips brush just beneath her ear. You need to know that too. Her body tensed, then softened. She was learning. Good. I stepped in front of her again, watching her carefully. Tell me what you are. Her voice trembled. Yours. And who else touches what's mine? No one. Who else makes you smile? No one. I brushed a finger down her collarbone, slow and deliberate. Show me. She looked up at me, wide-eyed, uncertain, but not unwilling. And when her hands moved, lifting to unfasten the buttons of her dress, I didn't stop her. I watched. Her fingers fumbled once, then found rhythm. Silk slipped from her shoulders, revealing skin I'd already claimed. But this wasn't about claiming. This was about correction. When she stood bare before me, I didn't rush. I let the moment stretch until her breathing turned shallow again, until I could see it. The need, the shame, the heat, all tangled behind her eyes. You remember last night? I asked. Yes, she whispered. Then you know I can take you gently. She nodded. But I won't. Her breath hitched. I stepped closer, pressing my hand flat against the mark above her heart. My seal, still healing, still tender. This time, I murmured, you'll feel what it means to be. And then I kissed her, not softly, not sweetly, but with the kind of possession that left no doubt who she belonged to.
The sun hadn't yet touched the horizon, but I was already awake, lying on the edge of his bed, with the sheets tangled around my legs like restraints made of silk and memory. My body ached in places I couldn't name aloud. My skin was flushed with the afterglow of possession, each breath a quiet echo of his. He had left before dawn, again, and though I knew he moved in a world that required blood and silence, his absence now felt heavier than his weight ever had. He didn't speak of where he went, he didn't ask for permission, but he always returned, and that was somehow worse, because I waited. The room was still dark, but the fire had burned low, casting long shadows over the floor. I traced one with my finger, imagining it was his. The way he touched me, not with kindness, not exactly, but with precision, with the authority of someone who knew I would break if he asked, and still chose to bend me instead. My lips still tingled from his mouth. My thighs still trembled from his hands. And yet, it wasn't the pain I remembered most. It was the way he looked at me, like I was both his ruin and his reward. The knock on the door was soft, but I flinched anyway. Julia entered without waiting. She never did. She carried a dress folded over her arm, deep red, the color of warning, or worship. She laid it on the edge of the bed, her gaze lingering just a breath too long on the bruises at my collarbone. "Are you well, Signora?" I nodded, but my voice betrayed me. "Yes. You'll dine with him this evening, in the south wing." I blinked. "Alone?" She gave a single nod. "Yes." That word meant more now than it had before. I waited until she left to rise, the robe sliding from my shoulders as I crossed the room. I moved slower now, not from weakness, from awareness. I wasn't the same girl who had entered this castle veiled and voiceless. I was marked, owned, and it showed in the way I held myself, in the way I touched my own skin as I dressed, carefully, reverently, like every part of me was no longer mine. The red silk clung to my body like breath, low at the back, high at the neck, long sleeves that hid nothing of the way I felt him even in his absence. When I stepped into the hall, the guards lowered their eyes, not in shame, in respect, but I could feel it, the tension, the awareness, not of me as a woman, of me as his. The south wing was warmer, quieter, lit by low lamps and the scent of something dark and sweet. I entered the dining room and found him already seated, one hand wrapped around a glass of deep red wine, the other resting lightly on the table. He didn't rise when I approached. He only looked at me, slowly, thoroughly, like he was deciding if I'd learned. "You're late," he said softly. I sat across from him, only by moments. Moments are everything. I lowered my gaze, only for a second. "I'm sorry." He didn't respond. He didn't need to. Dinner was served. We ate in silence. But the silence wasn't empty. It pulsed. He watched every movement, the way I brought the glass to my lips, the way I swallowed. I felt it all like a touch. When I dared to meet his eyes again, I saw it. The storm. Quiet. Unmoving. Waiting. "Do you understand now?" he asked finally. My voice barely rose above a breath. "Understand what? What you are?" I didn't answer. Not yet. He leaned back in his chair, eyes sharp, voice low. "You're not just mine," he said. "You're visible, and that makes you dangerous." I swallowed. "To who?" "To me."
She sat across from me in silence, her spine straight, her lips soft from the wine, her eyes holding questions she didn't dare speak, and I let the silence stretch. I needed her to feel it, not discomfort, consequence. She was learning the weight of visibility, the cost of being seen in my world, in my orbit. Her beauty wasn't hers anymore, it was mine. And every glance that lingered, every whisper behind her back wasn't curiosity, it was a threat. One I'd burn down the entire south wing to silence if needed. When I finally stood, her gaze followed me like a tether. I circled the table slowly, each step measured, deliberate, until I stood behind her. I didn't touch her, not yet. I wanted her to feel the absence first. "Do you know what they said about you after the ceremony?" I asked, voice low, drifting against her shoulder like smoke. She shook her head. "That you looked breakable." I leaned in, my lips brushing the shell of her ear. "That you smiled like a girl. That you didn't seem afraid enough." Her breath caught. I heard it. "They don't understand," I continued. "That softness is not weakness. That obedience is not ignorance. And that your fear is mine to command, not theirs to provoke." I reached down, fingers grazing the inside of her wrist, where the scar from the blade still whispered my, "Did you enjoy their eyes on you, Sarah?" "No," she whispered. "But you knew they were watching." She hesitated. "Yes. And you let them." Her pulse raced beneath my fingertips. I could feel her restraint, the tension between guilt and need, between the desire to please me and the ache of not knowing how. I moved around to face her, crouching slowly, so we were eye to eye. "Look at me." She did. "God help me." She did. "Everything they see," I said. "Every step you take, every breath you draw, it reflects on me. You are not separate from my power. You are the visible extension of it. And that means when you speak, when you smile, when you so much as breathe, it must be deliberate." Her voice cracked. "How do I learn that?" I brushed a strand of hair from her face, slow and precise. "By letting me show you." She nodded. No hesitation now, just breathless consent. I stood, offering. She took it. The hallway was dim as I led her back to our wing, her fingers small inside mine, her steps silent, but I could feel the storm gathering behind composure. Not fear this time. Need. Need to understand, to please, to belong so completely that nothing outside of us could reach her again. Inside the bedroom, I closed the door behind us and turned slowly. "Undress," I said softly. Her eyes widened, but her hands moved. Each movement was careful, reverent. The dress slid from her shoulders like water, pooling at her. She stood bare before me, not trembling, not quite. Her gaze flicked up, searching for instruction, for approval, for more. I crossed the room, taking my time. I let my hands graze the mark on her chest, the one still healing, still red with my seal. "You will walk with me tomorrow," I said. "To the chapel, to the table, to the court." Her breath hitched. "They will watch you, and they will know." I tilted her chin up. "That what they want," I whispered, "is already owned." And then I kissed her, slow, deep, claiming. Not because I needed to remind her, but because I knew she wanted to remember.
I had never known what it meant to be watched until I walked beside him through the courtyard that morning. My hand rested lightly on his arm, but it felt like a chain, velvet and gold, binding me to something far larger than myself. The sky was soft with early light, the air scented with stone and smoke, and still, all I could feel was the burn of eyes, unseen but unmistakably present. They weren't looking at me, not really. They were looking at his, what belonged to him, what had been sealed and marked and consumed in silence behind closed doors. And now they saw it, on display, moving where he moved, breathing where he breathed. I had become the reflection of his power, and every step felt like a ritual. He said nothing. He didn't need to. His silence was deliberate, a language I was learning to read. When we reached the chapel doors, he paused, his hand resting over mine, pressing it tighter against his arm. I glanced up at him, that unreadable gaze, that exquisite control. I no longer wondered what he was thinking. I only wanted to deserve it. Inside, candles lined the walls like sentinels. I followed him down the aisle, past kneeling guards and bowed heads, until we reached the front pew. He gestured for me to sit. I obeyed. The prayer was recited in low voices, but I couldn't hear the words. I only heard the echo of his breath beside me, steady, sovereign. My body remembered his hands, the way they held me not for pleasure, but for promise. The ache between my thighs pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat. I hadn't thought devotion could feel like this, warm, dizzying, utterly consuming. When the service ended, he helped me to my feet. The crowd parted without a sound. No one dared speak. We walked out into the courtyard again, this time toward the market below the hill. I had never been allowed there. My world had been stone corridors, locked doors, whispered orders. But now people stepped aside, eyes lowered, and yet curiosity danced beneath their lashes. We paused at a flower stall. Without a word, he picked a single white lily and handed it to me. I took it, heart thundering. He didn't smile, but his fingers lingered on mine a second longer than necessary. A voice cut through the stillness. "She's beautiful, Don Rosa Croce. A rare bloom indeed." I turned. A man stood just beyond the edge of the market square. Older, well-dressed, eyes too direct. I didn't know his name, but I didn't need to. Dante didn't reply. He simply looked at him, A pause. A silence so thick it could crush stone. Then he turned to me, his voice a thread of velvet steel. "Serafina." "Yes?" I asked quietly. "Give the flower back." I blinked. "Why?" He didn't look at the man. He didn't raise his voice. But his tone left no room for misunderstanding. "Because I changed my mind." I handed him the lily. He crushed it slowly in his fist, petal by petal, never breaking eye contact with me. And then, still calm, still elegant, he turned back to the man and said nothing, just watched him, until he left. Only then did he take my hand again, this time tighter, possessive, fierce. "Beauty is not a gift," he murmured. "It's bait, and I won't let you dangle." I didn't speak, but a part of me, the one buried deepest, the one with his mark, felt something terrifying. I liked the way he protected me, even when it hurt.
She didn't flinch when I crushed the lily. That mattered. She looked at me with wide eyes, not frightened, not upset, simply waiting. It was that stillness in her that undid me, the way she stood there, unmovable, composed, letting me handle the insult without demanding softness from me. She didn't ask questions. She didn't try to calm the fire I hadn't yet shown. She just watched, trusted, and that was the most dangerous thing she could have done, because trust makes men reckless. I didn't speak on the walk back to the estate. I needed to think. My hand remained wrapped around hers, not tender, but firm, not because she might run, because I might. I could feel the heat rising behind my eyes, that slow, black tension that always came before violence. Someone had whispered her name where they shouldn't have. Someone had watched her long enough to speak without invitation. That meant they believed I was distracted, unfocused, maybe weakened. They were wrong, but they would need to bleed to be reminded. Inside the hall, I released her hand and gestured toward the marble bench near the staircase. "Sit." She obeyed instantly, the hem of her dress sliding up just slightly as she crossed her leg. She didn't know what that did to me, or maybe she did. Either way, I turned before she could see the tension in my jaw. Ezio was waiting for me by the inner corridor. "They're here," he said. "All of them." "Good." He hesitated. "She shouldn't be near this." My eyes slid to him. "She won't be near it, but she will know it happened." Ezio nodded once and stepped back. I turned to her, my voice lower now, measured. "There are things you won't be invited to witness, Serafina, but you will still feel the consequences. Do you understand?" She nodded. "Yes." I walked to her slowly, taking her face in my hands. "You are not here to soften me. You're here to sharpen me." "I'm not afraid of what you do," she whispered. I leaned down, pressing my forehead to hers. "You should be." Then I turned and walked into the chamber. The men were already waiting, 3 of them. 2 I expected, 1 I didn't, and that one, the oldest, was the man from the market. He had underestimated, mistook my silence for permission, my calm for acceptance. That would be his final end. "Don Rosa Croce," he said with a shallow nod. No offense was met. Offense was given, removing my ring, and that, rolling up, requires correction. This isn't necessary. Neither was speaking. You couldn't have went still. The crack of bone, efficient, precise. I didn't shout, didn't snarl. Like a man teaches a lesson with his fists, his boots, with the memory of pain that stays long after his fade. I let the others watch. Let them smell blood. Let them hear the way he begged, not for his life, but for mine. I didn't kill him. That would have been too merciful. When I returned to her, my shirt was clean. My steps were calm. My hands were steady. But when I sat beside her, she looked at me with something new in her. Not fear, not horror. Something darker. Something deeper. "Is it over?" she asked. "For now." She reached out and placed her hand over mine, and I realized then she would never try to change me. She would only love what I already was.
I should have been afraid of the sounds behind the door. The quiet thuds, the muffled pleas, the final silence. But I wasn't. I sat where he told me to, hands folded in my lap, heart steady. It wasn't calm I felt. It was clarity. This was the world I'd been brought into, not by accident, but by blood. And he was the man who ruled it, not with noise, but with finality. When he returned, he didn't speak. He sat beside me, as if the quiet was still dripping from his hands. I looked at him, really looked, and saw no trace of conflict, no hesitation, only control so absolute it made something inside me shift. I reached for him. He didn't flinch. My fingers found his hand, warm and solid beneath mine. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. I only wanted to feel that he was still real, that the man who could silence a room with a glance still had a pulse. And when his thumb brushed softly over my knuckles, something low and heavy twisted deep inside me. Later, alone in my chambers, I paced. The night was too quiet, and the thoughts too loud. Julia had brought wine. I barely touched it. I didn't want to be softened. I wanted to be ready. Ready for what, I wasn't sure. but I felt it building, a shift, a storm, a line I was about to cross and never return from. A knock at my door startled me. I turned, heart jumping, expecting him, but it was a voice I didn't know. "Forgive me, Signora. Lord Dante has requested your presence in the north parlor." The north parlor. I hadn't been allowed there. I dressed quickly. Something dark, fitted, serious. I didn't want to look soft. I didn't want to look innocent. I wanted him to see I understood now. What it meant to carry his name, to walk beside him without trembling. When I entered the parlor, the air changed. Heavy velvet curtains, low light, the faint trace of cigar smoke, lingering in the silk of the chairs. He stood at the bar, pouring a drink. He didn't turn when I stepped inside. "I thought you might not come," he said quietly. "You summoned me." That earned me a glance. The way his eyes moved over me, slow, deliberate, made my skin tighten beneath the fabric. He poured a second glass and held it out. "I don't summon you. I invite you." I took the drink, even though my hands trembled. Our fingers brushed. His gaze didn't leave mine. "I heard what they said about you today," he murmured, stepping closer. I swallowed. "What did they say?" "That I've never been so distracted." My chest tightened. "They said you walk like you own my attention." "I don't," I whispered. "You do." He was in front of me now. The space between us vanished, replaced by heat, by breath, by that invisible thread I could never untangle. His hand lifted, brushing the side of my neck, tracing the edge of my jaw. "I've killed for less than what I feel when they look at you." I should have flinched. I should have stepped back. I stepped forward. "And what do you feel when you look at me?" I asked. His hand slid lower, resting just over the mark he'd burned into my skin, like I'd burn the world if it ever touched you. And then he kissed me, not with the hunger of a man starved, but with the fury of a man who finally understood what he could lose.
Her mouth tasted like defiance and silk, like fire held too long on the tongue, and I kissed her as if that could erase the world beyond these walls. Her breath trembled against mine, but she didn't pull away. She pressed closer, closer, until her body molded to mine like it remembered where it belonged. I gripped her waist, not gently, not to guide, but to remind, and when I pulled back, just enough to see the flush bloom across her cheekbones, the hunger in her eyes made my restraint burn. "I don't like being watched," I said softly, brushing my knuckles against her throat. "I didn't ask them to look," she whispered. "No." My eyes narrowed. "But you let them." She swallowed, and I felt the movement against my hand. Her pulse betrayed her, fast, frantic, beautiful. "They're testing you," I continued, stepping behind her, sliding my hands over her hips, watching what makes me flinch, what I'll tolerate, what I'll forgive. She stood very still. "And what will you forgive?" "Nothing." My voice wasn't cruel. It was truth. I leaned down, my breath coiling against her neck. "I'll let them wonder if I'm soft with, but you and I both know I'm not." Her body tensed, then melted, and it made me ache. "You don't have to prove anything," she murmured, so quiet I almost missed it. "Yes, I do." I turned her to face me again. "Because you don't see what I see. You walk into rooms like you don't carry the key to my control. You smile, not knowing it pulls a trigger. You look at me like you expect me to be good." Her eyes widened. "I've never asked you to." "No," I said, sliding my hand in, "but you've made me want to be." Her breath hitched as I tilted her head back, baring her throat to my gaze. I didn't kiss her. Not yet. I wanted her to feel the pause, the decision, the tension strung tight between who I had to be and what she made me become. "There's a storm coming," I whispered against her skin. "I know, and it's because of you." She didn't deny it. She didn't apologize. She simply looked up at me with those wide, devastating eyes and said, "Then let it come." That was the moment I lost the last shred of distance I'd been pretending to hold. I lifted her effortlessly, carried her to the wall, pressing her back against the cold stone while her legs wrapped around her waist. Her dress slid up, my mouth found her neck, and I didn't ask permission. Because I already had it. She gave it to me the moment she stopped being afraid. The moment she started wanting the storm.
My back hit the stone with a sound that should have startled me, but it didn't. I was too full of him, of the weight of his body, the heat of his breath, the promise in his hands. His mouth was everywhere and nowhere, a ghost at my neck, a warning at my collarbone, a possession carved into each inch he claimed. I didn't speak. I couldn't. Words had no place in this. Only breath. Only the sharp pull of air when he bit down, when he whispered things too filthy and sacred to ever repeat aloud. He didn't ask if I wanted this. He knew. And that was what undid me. Not the pressure of his hips against mine or the bruises blooming beneath his fingers. It was that he had seen inside me, deeper than anyone, deeper than I had ever dared go. And he hadn't flinched. He had stayed. And now he was burning every piece of that devotion into my skin, so I would never forget. You don't understand, he growled against my throat. What you've done to me. And then tell me, I breathed, already breaking for him. You've made me crave silence, he said, the kind that only exists when you're beneath me. I whimpered, and he smiled against my skin like he'd just heard prayer. You made me want peace, he continued, and that's not something men like me survive. I wrapped my arms tighter around his neck, anchoring myself to the one thing I knew would destroy me, and wanting it anyway. Then don't survive, I whispered. Just stay. He stilled. The air around us shifted. I could feel it. The moment his rage melted into reverence, his forehead rested against mine, his breath uneven, the storm behind his eyes finally giving way to something quieter, not softer, just deeper. You want all of me, he said, voice barely a breath. Even the parts that bleed. I already have them. His mouth found mine then, not to silence, not to dominate, but to offer. And I took it all. Every broken piece, every promise he didn't know how to make. I kissed him like he was salvation and sin in the same breath. I kissed him like I didn't care what it cost. Because I didn't. Not anymore.
She doesn't know yet that the night we just shared was our last moment untouched by war. I watched her sleep with her hands still resting where my chest had been, as if her body knew how to keep me near even in dreams. I should have woken her, should have told her what Ezio whispered through the door before dawn, that one of mine is turned, that the blood I spilled last week wasn't enough, that someone dares to want her not just to touch, but to take, and they're coming. But I didn't wake her. I needed one more moment, one more breath of her warmth before I became the man the world expects again, before I turned ruthless, before I reminded them what I do when something mine is threatened. I dressed in silence. Black shirt, no tie, my ring back on, my knife hidden where no one sees. The hallway outside was colder than, or maybe that was just me, empty now that I'd left her. Ezio waited at the bottom of the stairs, his jaw tight, his eyes full of things he didn't want to say. Where? I asked. He didn't pretend not to understand. South corridor. 2 guards missing. 1 door forced. And the target? His voice dropped. Her. Always her. My pulse didn't spike. My voice didn't rise. Only my vision sharpened. Every sound clearer. Every step heavier. Lock every entrance, I said. Seal the halls. Move the women to the chapel. I want eyes on every shadow. Ezio nodded. And her? She stays in my bed. My voice was ice. Anyone touches her, even by accident, they die. We moved like a current through stone. The estate knew something had shifted. Servants vanished into corners. Guards moved faster. I felt the weight of every gaze tracking me, waiting to see who I would become this time. I didn't give them blood. Not yet. I gave them certainty. They would fear me more than they feared the ones coming. But in the back of my mind, beneath the planning, beneath the steel, I saw her face. The way she'd looked at me last night, like I wasn't the monster they whispered about, like I was still worthy of softness. I didn't know how to keep that, only how to protect it. I reached the corridor, found the signs myself, the gouge in the door frame, the mark on the floor where something heavy had been dragged, a warning, a message, or a mistake. Either way, someone had signed their death. I turned to Ezio. Find them. I want names. You'll have them by midnight. I looked toward the stairs, toward the room where she still slept. No, I said. I'll have them before sunset. And this time, I wasn't making a request. I was making a promise.
I woke to the sound of silence, the kind that doesn't belong in a house like this, the kind that wraps around your ribs and tightens. His side of the bed was cold. The sheets still held the shape of his body, the imprint of his weight, the scent of his skin, but he was gone. And something in me knew this wasn't a morning he wanted me to greet. I sat up slowly, the bruises on my hips blooming like dark petals. My fingertips brushed the edge of the sheets as if they could tell me where he went, what changed while I slept. I wrapped the robe around me and stepped into the hall. It was too quiet. No movement, no footsteps, no servants bustling about pretending not to watch. Something had happened, and they didn't want me to know. Julia appeared from nowhere, her eyes wide, her mouth set too tightly. She bowed her head but didn't speak. What is it? I asked, and my voice didn't tremble. She shook her head. You should stay in the room, Signora. That was answer enough. My chest tightened as I moved past her. The corridors felt wrong, too clean, too still. I passed the south wing, doors shut, guards stationed. I felt the eyes on me again, but this time not from desire, from dread. Ezio found me near the east staircase. You shouldn't be walking alone. I didn't stop. Where is he? He sighed. Dealing with it? With what? Ezio hesitated. His hand flexed at his side. They were looking for you. My blood went cold. They got close. How close? I asked, breath shallow now. He didn't answer. That was answer enough, too. I turned, fast, heading back toward the room, toward the place where I had felt safe just hours ago. My mind raced, not with fear, but with questions. Who? Why now? What did they want with me, beyond what he had already taken? And underneath it all, the voice I didn't want to hear was guilt, because I had let my guard down. I had fallen asleep with a smile on my lips, with his name on my tongue, believing for one night that desire could keep us safe, that his body on mine was enough of a shield. I reached the room and closed the door behind me, locking it with fingers that wouldn't stop shaking. My legs gave out. I sank to the floor, back against the wood, robe slipping from one shoulder. I pressed my palms over the mark on my chest, the one he burned there, the one that still pulsed when I breathed too deeply. He hadn't told me. He'd left me sleeping while someone tried to take me, and yet I wasn't angry, because I knew him, knew what kind of fire he became when someone touched what he called his. I stared at the door, at the silence behind it, and whispered only one thing: "Bring me back whole, Dante," because I could feel the storm breaking already, and I didn't know if he'd come back untouched.
The first man didn't beg. He knew better. He stood proud even as blood spilled from his mouth, defiance staining his teeth red. But pride means nothing when you touch what's mine. I didn't ask why he did it. I didn't need confessions, only reminders. And I carved every one of them into his flesh. Slowly, quietly, until there was no misunderstanding left in his bones. This is what it means to want what belongs to me. The others watched. I wanted them to. One moved to speak, but Ezio's blade found his throat before the lie could crawl from his lip. I didn't flinch. I let the silence stretch, let the scent of blood settle into the stone, let the weight of what I'd done settle over them like smoke. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't shout. I didn't have to. I understood. This wasn't rage. It was law. I left the room cleaner than I found it, not physically, but with order restored, with message delivered, with names crossed from my ledger. My boots echoed through the hall, loud against the quiet, each step a warning that peace is not mercy, it is permission. And I had revoked it. I didn't go to my quarters. I didn't return to the office or the chapel or the court. I went to her. Because while they tried to reach her, she had waited for me, and I needed to see her eyes, needed to see if the storm I became had left a shadow in. The guard stepped aside, the door opened, and there she was, sitting on the floor, robe barely clinging to her shoulders, hair wild around her face, eyes too wide, too still, but she wasn't afraid. She looked at me like she'd been watching the horizon for a ship only she believed would return, and now that I had, she didn't run. I knelt in front of her. She didn't speak. Her fingers reached for mine, slow, unsure, until her hand rested over the back of my blood-stained one. "You're hurt," she said quietly. "Not mine," I murmured. She exhaled, as if she'd been holding her breath since I left. "I should have woken you," I said, softer. "I didn't want you to feel what I was about to become." She leaned forward, pressing her forehead to mine, our breath mingling in the dark. "But I did," she whispered. "Even from here, I felt you disappear." I closed my eyes. "You came back," she said. "I always will. Whole." No. She didn't pull away. She kissed me, slow, deep, like she was trying to give back every piece I'd left behind. And I let her, because she didn't need me clean. She needed me hers.
He didn't speak after the kiss. He didn't need to. I felt everything in the way his hands trembled against my back, the way his breath slowed like he was relearning how to exist in a world that hadn't taken me from him. I held him tighter, not to comfort, to anchor, because I understood now what he carried, what he buried, what he became when they tried to touch what he swore was his. I had felt the violence before, but this was something else. This was grief laced with survival. Love, stripped of softness. I rose first, pulling him up with me, his shirt stiff with drying blood, his silence thicker than stone. My fingers slipped through his and he followed. No resistance. We didn't speak as we crossed the threshold into the bath chamber. I filled the basin slowly, the water steaming, the scent of rosemary thick in the air. He stood still as I undid the buttons of his shirt, peeling it from his body like armor. Bruises darkened his ribs. Scratches ran like whispers across his chest. I touched each one with care, but not hesitation. "Who did this?" I asked, voice low, voice dangerous. He met my eyes. Dead men. I nodded once and said nothing more. He stepped into the water and I followed. Clothes forgotten, the world forgotten. The warmth wrapped around us, and I moved behind him, pouring water over his shoulders, running my fingers down his spine, watching the blood swirl away from his skin. I wasn't here to save him. He didn't need that. But I could cleanse what the world made him carry. His voice broke the silence. "I don't want this for you." I paused, my hands at his waist. "What?" "This." His jaw tightened. "This life. This weight. The fear." I moved in front of him, kneeling between his legs in the water, cupping his face in both hands. Then don't make me carry it alone. His eyes closed, just for a moment, then opened again, darker, deeper. You never flinch. Not from you. He reached for me then, pulling me onto his lap, his hands trailing down my wet skin, slow, reverent, as if he needed to memorize every piece of me before the world tried again to take me. I wrapped myself around him, my lips against his throat, and whispered, "If they come again, they won't. But if they do," I pressed, voice steady, "let me bleed beside you." His hands froze. Then one lifted, curling around the back of my neck, firm. "You bleed only when I ask for it." "And if you fall?" I asked, breath trembling now. "What's left of me then?" He kissed me hard, not out of anger but desperation, as if trying to etch the answer into my mouth. "You survive," he said. "You carry my name. You destroy everything that tried to unmake me. And what do I call myself if I'm not yours?" His forehead pressed to mine. "You'll never have to learn."
The chapel was silent when I entered, but I could feel them breathing. All of them. The elders. The soldiers. The old blood who thought I'd cracked, who waited for a moment of hesitation, a flicker of weakness, a sign that I'd allowed love to turn into liability. They watched me not as their Don, but as a man who had touched something sacred and might now be ruled by. And maybe I was. Maybe I had let her rewrite me in the dark. But what they didn't understand was that loving her didn't make me softer. It made me holy. The table in the center was bare. No food, no wine, only the book. The ledger that held our names, our sins, our lineage written in ink and blood. My father's name, his father's, and now mine. One last space left blank. The space for the one who would carry the house forward. I walked without pause, each step echoing like judgment, like a vow. I took the knife from the altar, the one used for generations, not for violence, for sacrifice. I sliced my palm without flinching, let the blood fall onto the page. My signature bloomed crimson, a seal of continuity. Then I turned. "I gave you order," I said, my voice steady, slow, calculated to wrap around their spines and settle there. "I gave you fear, loyalty, obedience, and you gave me doubt." A ripple moved through the crowd. They said nothing. "I let you watch me bleed for her. I let you think love made me vulnerable." I held up my hand, blood still dripping. "But this is not weakness. It's legacy." Ezio stepped forward, offering the second knife, the one she would use. And then the doors opened. She entered like stormlight, calm, composed, but powerful in the way only someone fully possessed can be. Her dress was black, no veil, no jewels, only the scar above her heart, the one I gave her, glowing red beneath the silk, the mark of belonging. She walked to me without a word. I handed her the blade. She didn't hesitate. Her palm opened, crimson spilling into mine as we pressed them together over the ledger. Blood to blood, oath to oath. My name etched into her body, now hers etched into my world. She looked at me, serene, certain, deadly, and whispered, "Only for me, yours." And the room bowed, not to me, to us.
I never imagined that silence could feel like power. But now, seated beside him at the head of a table that once refused to acknowledge my name, I understood. They didn't speak unless spoken to. They didn't blink unless he did. And yet it wasn't just him they watched anymore. It was me. Not because I was beautiful, not because I was his, but because now they knew. I chose this. I walked into the fire and asked to burn. The scar over my heart had healed into something darker, deeper. Some days I could still feel the ghost of heat rising from it, as if my skin remembered what it meant to be claimed. But tonight, there was no heat, no pain, only the weight of his hand resting lightly on my thigh beneath the table, fingers curled possessively, rhythm steady against my skin like a promise whispered through bone. He hadn't spoken to me since we left the chapel. He hadn't needed to. The moment our blood sealed the page, the moment his name and mine bled into the same line, something in us settled, and something else woke up. I sipped the wine slowly, eyes fixed on nothing, everything. I could feel their unease. How could someone like me, someone trained to kneel, sit beside a man like him and not break? But they didn't understand. I didn't survive despite him. I survived because of him. And when he stood, finally, chair scraping gently across the stone, the entire room shifted. He didn't look at them. He looked only at me. Come. That single word, it unraveled me more than any kiss. I stood without hesitation. My hand slid into his, fingers interlacing in the way they had the very first time he pulled me into the fire and never let go. We walked together down the corridor in silence, past the chapel, past the carved doors, past the eyes that no longer questioned. He didn't stop until we reached the edge of the courtyard, where the moonlight kissed the marble and the air tasted like rain. He turned to me, slow, deliberate. You never bowed, he said. I was never meant to. His eyes darkened. You remember what I told you? I nodded. That love makes men reckless, and still you asked me to stay. I stepped forward, fingers rising to brush the edge of his jaw, because I never wanted to survive this. I wanted to become it. He exhaled through his nose, a sound that carried everything he didn't say. Then he pulled me into his arms, mouth at my ear, voice a blade wrapped in velvet. Then you'll never leave it. And I smiled, because I never wanted to.
She's sleeping beside me now, curled beneath the sheets, bare skin glowing silver under the moonlight slipping through the open balcony doors. One hand rests over her mark, the one I gave her, fingers splayed like she's still claiming herself in the dark. And I watch her, because I don't know how not to, because every breath she takes while I'm still here feels like a miracle I'm not sure I earned. She doesn't stir when I shift closer, doesn't flinch when my fingers brush her shoulder. Slow, reverent, memorizing. Not because she trusts me, not anymore, because she knows me. She's seen what lives beneath the suit, beneath the oath, beneath the silence. And she didn't run, she stayed. That truth humbles me more than any throne I've taken. I remember the first time I saw her, small, veiled, trembling under the weight of destiny. I thought I would break her. I thought I would own her. But I didn't understand then. What you own can still leave you. What you worship becomes part of your bones. She became mine because I gave her no choice. But she stayed mine because she chose not to run when I finally bled. I lower my mouth to her shoulder, kiss the warm curve slowly, like a vow. She sighs in her sleep, leans into me without waking, and I feel it again. That sharp, relentless need to protect something I no longer see as weakness. Because she isn't fragile. She's the blade beneath velvet, the storm behind silence, the reason men bow and don't even know why. They call me Dawn, but it's her they look at now when they say my name. She took a world built on blood and claimed it without raising her voice. She broke a table of wolves by simply sitting at, and they fear her, not because she commands power, but because she doesn't need to ask for it. She is the power, and I'll guard her with teeth and ruin for the rest of my life. My hand settles on her waist, pulling her gently into my chest. She hums something soft, something wordless, and I whisper it into her skin anyway. You are the only thing I'd die for with a smile. She doesn't answer, but she doesn't need to, because she already knows. Thank you for walking with us until the end of this story, for breathing with each chapter, for feeling with each word. Your presence here is not just seen, it is felt, deeply, like a hand pressed over the heart in the quiet after the storm. If this tale moved something in you, even a little, let it echo. Leave a trace, a like, a comment, a word, even a whisper of, I'm here. Every single one tells the shadows that this story mattered, that someone heard it, that someone wanted more. Subscribe, if you haven't yet. It's free. But what you give in return is priceless. A reason to keep writing, to keep burning, to keep bleeding truth on. And if you feel called, share this with someone who aches, someone who loves, someone who's forgotten how stories can save. Together, we can drown out the noise with something softer, something real. Thank you for being here, and may you always, always feel welcome in this voice.